Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Talk.
A real Celtic talk show by real Celtic fans from the Carluke Shamrock Supporters Club on Hail Hail Media.
Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Tic Talk, 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 Talk.
Hail, hail, it's Richard here from the Carluke Shamrock Celtic Supporters Club. Now, we just released last night our last Tic Talk podcast of the season, which of course was called the Double Season Closer. And if you've not listened to that yet, then please do so through Spreaker or iTunes or YouTube by searching for Hail Hail Media or for Tic Talk. So if that was our last show of the season, why on earth can you see another podcast from us? Well as our own Tic Talk shows with our own members from our own supporters club, from time to time we also do some special events where we go out about and we record different sessions that other supporters clubs have, or other media sessions or question and answer sessions that go on. And these little ad hoc podcasts get thrown in from time to time, which can be of interest to a lot of the listeners out there, especially expats who obviously can't go to such events, can't get the tickets for them, and it's just our way of serving that community and putting the content out there for the people that want to hear it. And our very own roving reporter Vincent was on just such a duty this evening. I'll let him explain exactly where the event is and who's all involved, etc. But let me just pay the proper respects and credits to these people. So this is not a Tic Talk show, but we have recorded the event, which is a fellow Celtic Supporters Club event, which in this case is the Civil Service CSC. And you'll hear Vincent having an interview with their main man, Mr. Ian Monk. And those guys asked us if we would be kind enough to pop along and record the event, and Vincent, being the good man that he is, did that to help out that fellow Celtic Supporters Club and help out the listeners. So not only did he manage to grab the Q&A from the audience of Celtic supporters and the mainstream media guys that were there at the time, he also managed to do some one-on-one interviews as well. So you can hear them at the start, but Vincent will guide you through the whole night and you can hear exactly who was there and what happened. So if that's of interest to you, then listen on. There's a lot of guys out there who like to, let's call, keep an eye on the mainstream media, and the Internet Bampots can get their teeth into that and see what they think about the latest sayings from those guys. So that's what this podcast is all about. Don't worry, we have not careered into the next season before you've even known it. The last podcast was indeed the last Tic Talk show of the season. So for this special recording of another event, let's go over to Vincent.
Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Tic Talk, 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 Talk.
Hail, hail, and welcome to Tic Talk with the Carluke Shamrock Celtic Supporters Club. My name's Vincent, and this podcast is being recorded on Tuesday the 28th of May. You can find more information about the club at carlukeshamrock.com and details of the podcast and the other Celtic family podcasts at hailhailmedia.com. Now tonight we've again been invited by the Scottish Civil Service Celtic Supporters Club. That's easy for me to say. We're over at a very special end of season question time, and the chair for tonight will be the BBC's Chris McLaughlin. Our panel will consist of Graham Spears, sports journalist. We'll have Scotland and Sunday sports columnist Tom English, and we'll also have Alison Robbie, the Radio Clyde's football correspondent. So Kevin from Tic Talk and I will be trying to grab the guys tonight, getting a word with the panellists. We hope to catch up with the club's president, Ian Monk, and we'll record for you all the questions and answers from the floor. So we're really looking forward to a good night. It's been a good night in the past, and I hope you all enjoy it too. So here we go, and we'll see you on the other side.
Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Tic Talk, 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 Talk.
Okay, so we're joined now by Alison Robbie from Radio Clyde. Alison, you're now on Hail Hail Media, and I'm Tic Talk's version of Alison Robbie. Obviously not as good looking and not as professional, I'll give you that, but I'm the best they could come up with. So, just trying to grab you before tonight's proceedings, Alison, just to get a couple of questions in for our listeners. I just really want to kick off with probably kind of highlights of the season. What's been your highlights of the season? Just finished on Sunday, obviously. Celtic getting the double.
Yes.
But just casting your mind back, what's been your highlights of the season?
A strange season, obviously, because it's an SPL that we weren't used to having, no Rangers, which was bizarre to start with, but I think Celtic's Champions League run really made up for it.
So Rangers winning Division 3, that's been your highlight of the season, is that what you saying?
For forgetting to the playoffs, that was my highlight. But no, Celtic's Champions League run, then do it there that night when they beat Barcelona. It's something that you'll never forget. I've never seen an atmosphere like it, even the Spartak Moscow game. Chris Commons got the penalty, the entire press box with their heads in their hands.
Right.
I've never seen anything like it, because you realise what's at stake. I was in Turin for the Juventus game as well, which is an unbelievable atmosphere for anybody that wasn't there. It was just a fantastic night, even of course they lost in the end, just to get to the last 16 for Celtic, which at the start of the season none of us would have thought we would have been covering Celtic in the last 16 of the Champions League. And then of course Scottish Cup final on Sunday, an unbelievable atmosphere. It's the first I've seen a display quite like the one pre-match, and that really just set the scene for a fantastic end to the season.
It's strange for it being all green and white, that's unusual in itself.
I know.
But I thought some of the pre-match stuff they did was fantastic.
It's absolutely brilliant. They really pushed out all the stops. I mean, usually they've had the balloons before, but never the whole display and the card display, and that's what it should be like. The Scottish Cup final should be the showpiece at the end of the season.
And just talking about you were talking about Spartak Moscow, it was kind of a weird atmosphere for that as well. Different for Barcelona, even though we knew we'd qualified. I thought Barcelona was almost a one-off, really. Do you know?
Nobody expected anything against Barcelona, and I think that was the thing. Celtic just went out, played their game, and they won the game, which nobody expected. Spartak Moscow, I think, suddenly realised we could do this. And so that penalty, when they got it, everybody in the stadium was thinking, you score this, Celtic are the last 16, you miss. Even though it turned out afterwards Chris Commons thought they were already through anyway.
I know, how scary was that?
No.
Well, we've been having chats just over the last couple of days just around, will we be able to replicate it next season, for example. And a lot of the chat around, because it's a Seville anniversary, would Celtic fans prefer to go one stage further in the Champions League, or would they prefer a drop down into Europa and get another chance at a final? It's kind of 50-50 at the minute, but I'd probably come down on the side. I'd love to go back to another final.
Yeah.
Just think it would be amazing. So I don't know, what's your thoughts?
It's a hard one, because you go into Celtic go into the Champions League wanting to get as far as they possibly can, and after the last 16 in the Champions League they want that again. They want to be playing with the big boys in Europe, but as you say, you've got a chance of another final if you drop into the Europa League, and realistically you're never going to really get to the final of the Champions League on the budget that Celtic are on in comparison to the other big teams in Europe. But it's a hard one, because you can't decide, because the atmosphere is just amazing in the Champions League, and Celtic are there with the biggest teams in Europe.
So I think support are divided on that one. As I say, I'd quite like the chance of another cup final. I think that would just be amazing, but again, it would be fantastic to go one stage further. I'll just get your thoughts on a couple of wee things and I'll let you go. Just comings and goings. I'm wondering, do you think we've saw the last of Hooper, maybe Wanyama? I know you'll have sources, Alison, so what can you tell us?
I think Wanyama, probably the last scene of Wanyama, and I think Gary Hooper, there was a dip in form from Gary Hooper in January with all the talk. We haven't been allowed to speak to Gary Hooper since then. He's never been put up in media, probably for the reason of will he stay or will he go. But in all honesty, if an offer comes in for Gary Hooper now, the club should take that, because if they keep him till then next season, they'll walk away for nothing, and they could bring another Gary Hooper in, or another Victor Wanyama. Celtic brought in these players and everything. Who's Victor Wanyama, who's Gary Hooper, and now they are names, and that's what Celtic need to be about.
I think that's probably a lot down to John Park. Rumours sweeping Twitter the day, always reliable, that Gary Hooper's on the verge of signing a 4-year deal. So I mean, I'm not sure either. In some ways, if he does, you could suggest that he's played it very clever. If he's actually thinking, well, actually I want a better deal, then leaving it this late and no speaking to the media might be the game
that he's playing. It's hard to tell. It's finally just on another person that might be playing the game. I know Neil Lennon's due to sit down with Dermot Desmond and talk about budgets and things like that. There's loads of rumours around Neil Lennon. Is Neil Lennon staying or going? It looks like Martinez is resigned today, so it looks like that might not be the route for him. But I think a lot of people thinking around maybe more domestic situation for Neil Lennon. Does he want to bring his kids up in some of the situations that, you know, and abuse that he gets? So what's your gut feeling? Do you think he'll still be here?
Neil Lennon's stock's high at the moment, and he needs to think about that. I think he needs to sit down with the board, and I think wages are an issue for him at the moment because he isn't on as much as previous Celtic managers have been on. I mean, you look what he's achieved, he'll think, am I being shortchanged here? If I go down south, I could earn a lot more money. But now he's tasted that Champions League success. There aren't many teams down south that he could go to and get that. So part of me thinks, will he give it another year? Will he see if he can replicate that again? And then maybe at the end of next season, that's the time. But I think a big factor is A, his wages, and B, how much money will he be allowed to spend? Because if he loses, say, Wanyama and Booper, he needs to bring players in to replace them.
The money to replace them. And maybe again he could be playing quite a clever game, you know, he could be actually thinking, well, I've not had the talks with Dermot, and actually I could be, you know, I think what he hasn't done is absolutely nailed it that he'll be here next season, which is why there's rumours, but actually that might again be quite a clever thing to do if he's going in for his discussions.
At the end of last season he just kind of slithered and said to me, I don't know how much money I'm going to spend, how much money I'm going to get to spend, and if I don't get a lot of money and we embarrass ourselves in Europe. This was at the end of last season, and then he did stay, and look what happened. So he's got a lot of things to weigh up, because on one side he's got a lot to keep him at Celtic, but there are things that will make him leave, so it's a difficult one to say yes or no.
So watch this space, and Alison, you'll keep us up to date on all the developments.
Always.
Yep, we'll tune in and hear it.
Yes.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, 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 tock.
Hail. Thanks for inviting Tic Talk along, Ian. We're
problem.
joined by Ian Monk and our Tic Talk roving reporter, Kevin. So, just a couple of questions, Ian. Your supporters club appears to be going from strength to strength, and you've lined up the big guns again tonight. So, just
it's going from strength to strength. Unfortunately, the big guns weren't available tonight, so we've had to make do with Graham Spears and Tom English.
The big guns.
But no, joking aside, it's great to get people of that quality to come along and engage in debate and have a laugh and talk about Celtic and talk about Scottish football and anything else that comes up. But the club's going from strength to strength. We've got almost 500 members now all over Scotland, and we want to grow. And it's just fun, you know. It's and our members enjoy nights like this.
That's great, it's excellent. So what have you got planned for kind of developing the club further then?
Well, we're always trying to increase our memberships. Any civil servant out there listening who wants to join the club can do so. But our main event is our St Andrew's Day dinner at the end of the year in November, which has been a huge success. And again, this year's our 5th anniversary, so we want to make it bigger and better. And it's again going to be at Celtic Park in the number 7 restaurant. So, we try and offer something different. We don't run buses to games, so we offer this type of event to members during the year, and seems to be hugely popular, you know.
I mean, the ones that we've done in the past have had great reviews and great downloads, so I think all the listeners kind of look forward to it.
Yeah, and people like, especially Graham and Tom English, they'll come along, you know, and they like kind of stirring things up a bit, which is good, you know, and they've got their opinions about Celtic and the way the club is run, the supporters. They'll have strong opinions about the players, Lennon, all of that. So, for a night like this, that's what you want. You want to kind of stir it up a bit. But they keep coming back, so they're obviously enjoying it.
Can I ask you not to encourage Kevin to stir it up a wee bit, just as a pre-warning?
Okay, Kevin.
I was just actually wondering if there's bouncers on the door to stop Bomber Brown from gate crashing.
No, please do, Kevin. You can stir it up as much as you like. I think someone like Graham Spears, especially, he likes things. He holds his own, and he likes stirring things up. But it's good fun, and it's like I said, it's these guys are well-known football writers, so we try and get that kind of quality. In fact, in the past, as you know, we've had Jim Traynor come along to a couple of our events in the past before he passed to the dark side.
It's just that I was asking you earlier what actually happened. Do you know what happened to Jim Traynor?
I don't know. I think he's working somewhere. I don't know where he's. Oh, hold on. Here comes Graham Spears. Hi, Graham.
Graham, you're joining us live on
Tape's flowing. Come in.
Hi on, no, I need a pint.
Oh, it's going to get.
He needs a pint. Go for it.
I'll have a Coke. Coke. That's Graham Spears just buying a drink, by the way.
You heard
I've got it recorded.
No, I don't know where Jim Trainor's gone at all. I think he's just disappeared. He seems to, no idea what he's doing.
It's quite interesting the fact that the Celtic fans have mobilised against the mainstream media to a large extent, and I think probably the people you've got here tonight represent probably the people who do carry more respect than some of the older generation, like Traynor, like Chick Young. So it's actually a credit to you and the organisation that you've got people along who are more articulate, seem to be more engaged with the fans through things like Twitter than some of the dinosaurs that we've seen in the past.
In saying that though, Kevin, and this may sound controversial, but when Jim Traynor came to our events, he was fantastic. He was very engaging. He had a lot of good things to say, I thought, and certainly my experience, I'm sure it won't be shared by a lot of people listening to this, but my experience is that he's been he was a great supporter of our club. I have to say that when he came along, and he came back because he enjoyed it, and certainly from my experience when he was answering questions, you get no indication at all that he was going to end up where he ended up, wherever that is, But okay, I think Graham and Tom English are respected journalists, and we've got Alison as well, Alison Robbie from Radio Clyde coming along, and for Chris McLaughlin from the BBC who's going to chair it. So, it's a very good night.
So, Ian, just to get a chance, what's your thoughts been on this season? How happy have you been about this season?
Well, I don't think you can't, as a Celtic fan, you can't be anything but delighted with the way the season's gone. We've won the league, we've won the Scottish Cup, we've made it into the last 16, we've performed better than I think most fans would have expected to perform on a European stage, and beating Barcelona at Celtic Park, Tony Watt scoring that fantastic winning goal. I think, and we've got a young team. I think the challenge will be to retain some of these players, to actually keep them. Wanyama, Hooper, these other players that have performed so well, Wanyama especially. And I think it's a challenge for the club to keep these players. There's absolutely no question. I mean, Wanyama is an extremely talented young player, and I think there'll be a lot of interest in him over the summer. I hope not, but the difficulty that Celtic has is capitalising on a great season, building on that, strengthening the squad again, which I think will happen because we'll have the money from the European campaign. But we are where we are, and I think it might be difficult.
I think that's interesting, Ian, because I think sometimes when we do the podcast, our conversation is around about which ones are we comfortable enough losing, because we do expect that we're going to lose 1, 2, possibly 3 of them, possibly the goalkeeper because of his England aspirations. I don't think those can be met playing in Scotland. Do you get the feeling that you want to retain all of those guys rather than capitalising on the assets?
Well, if you're aspiring to progress further in Europe, you want to hold on to your best players. And remember, these are very young players. But you also have the reality of somebody like Wanyama, who, if he left Celtic, would command a hefty fee. And the chief executive, Peter Lawwell, must be thinking, we need to capitalise on that asset. And Celtic have been buying players
with potential and turning
with
them
potential and turning them into players that will attract interest from, say, the Premiership or a European side. Now, I don't want to lose any of these players. I want them to stay, and I want us to build a strong Celtic so that we can progress even further in Europe. But the harsh reality is that a club like Celtic, we're relatively debt-free, but Celtic needs that income coming in. I don't know what Graham thinks. Graham's here with us now. I don't know what you think, Graham, about that, but it's just I think it's going to be difficult to hold on to some of these players.
Yeah, because I think we've got quite a pragmatic view on it, that if they didn't qualify, we've now got 3 Champions League qualifiers. If they didn't get into the Champions League, that would be a big dent in the revenue figure from where we were this season, in terms of what we managed to achieve in Europe. And I think we take the view that we're going to be in a market where we bring these players through, they've got potential, we turn them into better players, and we cash them in before the residual value falls. Because we look at Artur Boruc as an example, we've commonly spoken about that. We didn't cash him in at the right time, and it probably cost us, as well as his performance has been lesser.
What did you get for him in the end?
2 million.
A couple of million.
Could he probably got 6 or 7 the season before potentially?
There was also suggestions at the time that Boruc could have exercised this contractual thing where he was aged 27 and he'd been at Celtic for a certain amount of time, and conceivably he could have gone for a lot less. There's this rule that people haven't quite focused on. If you're over a certain age, you can walk away from your contract and the club cannot take a fee for you. It's never quite.
Was Andy Webster that?
Tells me about it. Yeah,
Andy Webster was the first.
But there's other ones. Webster was that freedom contract, but UEFA have got certain age brackets. I think 27 is one of them, 29 is one of them. When you fall within a certain age bracket and you've been at a club for 3 or 4 years, after 3 years you can exercise a right to walk away. So I'm not quite clear on it, but some of the Footballers Association people are always telling me this is something that still hasn't been focused on. Yeah, I take the point of it, Boruc. Yeah, they could have maybe got 4 or 5 million. I mean, it's the thing with Celtic, isn't it? I mean,
I think it's the thing with any Scottish club who brings through a player that's got potential. They start to realise some of that potential, and do you take the risk of them fully maximising their potential, or do you take the opportunity of getting similar type players and bringing them through? And I think the market we're in just now, to me, means that 2 or 3 of this team will probably end up moving on, unfortunately. But I think that's the market we're in. Sorry, Vincent.
what is this gadget, by the way? What's going on here?
You're live on Hail Media, Graham. TikTok, you've been on it before, you were on TikTok the last time.
I don't know what that thing is, I don't even know. Is it called a tablet or something?
It's an iPad, it's called an iPad.
Right.
Do you not get one of these free from the BBC?
No, I know, I'm a Luddite.
You're technical. Have you left the typewriter in the office?
I've just moved on to cassette tape and vinyl.
Yeah. Is that where you play all your Elton John and Elvis Costello?
I don't know, the amount of tweets you do every day, I don't know how you manage to do them in a typewriter.
I don't tweet half as much as some people.
I was going to ask you about that, because I spied last week about the domestic chores. Were you left by the good lady to all the domestic chores?
People mentioned that to me. I shouldn't have bothered babbling about that.
You have got an easy life.
I've had a very testing 4 days on that.
You've got an easy life. Your wife must be very, very
understanding.
The number of times you're tweeting about golf courses you're going to, you're going off on a summer tour on the road.
Yeah.
Listen, Ian, I've got a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. She sauntered off to Spain for a 4-day junket and left me high and dry. I didn't even know for sure when she was coming back. She just walked in through the door.
Sorry, if she was coming back or when she was coming back.
I had to do all this stuff.
Changing
Go
that.
easy on me this evening. I'm
The washing machine's back on the go though, aye. So
Eh?
the washing machine's back on the go.
Aye, there was various things went amiss in the 4 days. But I survived, and my kids survived.
Okay. Right, we'll wrap up there. Thanks very much.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, 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 tock.
Okay, we've prized Graham away from Ian just to grab a quick word. We're just about to kick off in about 5-10 minutes, but I just wanted to get Graham's thoughts on the highlights of the season after Celtic obviously winning the double on Sunday. Graham,
Yeah.
what's been your highlights of the season? What have you enjoyed this season? What have you not enjoyed?
I've been taken aback at how enjoyable the SPL is. I've always said that I thought it would be diminished by the loss of Rangers. I know that the Celtic people might disagree with me on that, but I think the SPL has been diminished by the loss of Rangers. I think the Rangers-Celtic rivalry has been diminished by what's happened to Rangers. I mean, what happened to Rangers was Rangers' own fault, but it's a brute fact. So that is the backdrop to how I approached this season. But I've been taken aback at how enjoyable it's been. I've enjoyed things, to be honest, about Scottish football and SPL football that I've spent a lot of my career ignoring. You know, how well Motherwell have done, how well St Johnstone have done. The Ross County story was terrific. I'm a big fan of Terry Butcher, I always have been. I think the Cally Thistle story has been terrific. So there have been lots of highlights. But obviously, I think that, you know, one of the greatest nights was the Celtic win over Barcelona in Glasgow. I mean, that was an amazing experience, an amazing game, and what I did notice about that was that, my goodness, Neil Lennon's credentials were severely buffed up in England because of that. Colleagues of mine down in England, guys I know in newspapers, were suddenly talking up Neil Lennon. Some of it was maybe a bit far-fetched, some of it in terms of Neil Lennon going to work in England was maybe a bit premature, but that night wasn't just great for Celtic and the Celtic supporters, great for him. So lots of things around the SPL I have found really interesting and really enjoyable.
It's almost been a kind of a refocus on some of the smaller teams, and as you say, the kind of the run-in between Inverness and Ross County, really quite exciting stuff.
Yeah,
there, you know?
absolutely.
Wasn't it something I was expecting the end of the season
Absolutely.
to be about?
Absolutely. I mean, I've quite often said that I've spent a lot of my so much of my reporting career and really writing columns and features has been Old Firm orientated, and this year I did something differently. I went to McDermott Park more. I'd scarcely been there before. Been to Ross County a few times, been to other games, been to Firth Park, and I've really enjoyed it. And it's taught me, actually, that of course Rangers and Celtic are the story, of course they are. But there's been lots of other things that I've really enjoyed. But the Rangers thing has also been fascinating and been time-consuming. I mean, it's been a circus and it's been a drama, and it's been really complicated. All sorts of other issues have arisen from that. But the football I've seen, I've enjoyed the SPL much more than I thought I would.
And actually, there was a kind of almost an acceptance and even suggestions amongst some Celtic fans around, thinking it's not a bad thing for St Mirren to win a cup, for Kilmarnock to win a cup last year, and actually Celtic fans started to hopefully accept the fact that we're not going to win, we've not divine right to win every single game. In actual fact, we lost a couple of games and we weren't absolutely devastated, not just because we thought we had the league covered, but just more for a point of view, actually it's not a bad thing for these teams to
absolutely.
We could possibly raise their quality as well.
I do think though that Celtic missed the stimulation provided by Rangers. I mean, Celtic fans, I notice, are split on this. A lot of Celtic fans have said to me, we don't miss Rangers one bit, we never have. Other Celtic fans have said to me, we do miss Rangers. I do miss Rangers because every club loves the big city rivalry. But I do think Celtic missed the stimulation of Rangers, which is why they weren't some of the domestic league form wasn't very good. I think it's just because the edge was missing.
I don't miss Rangers, I miss a challenger who's capable of pushing us. And if we could get a Motherwell or a big city team like Aberdeen back in the Ferguson era, done Dundee United in the Jim McLean era, if we could get a club like that who was pushing us to the limit, that to me doesn't have to be Rangers, and I think that's the important thing from a Celtic fan's perspective, is it can be one of these other big clubs that have, in periods gone by, have always kind of came through an era where they had a bit of dominance themselves, and that was exciting.
So we're going to give Graham the grilling. He's just getting set up for the third degree, so we better go. We're getting all sorts of signals here. Thanks very much, Graham.
Thanks, Graham.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, 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 tock.
Okay, Tic Talk's now joined by Tom English, esteemed columnist with the Scotland on Sunday. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Pleasure.
You're now on Hail Media.
Am I indeed? This is the first. This is my debut.
No, I think you've been on before.
I'm a veteran and I didn't even know.
I think we got you in Edinburgh. You're a well-kent face or voice now, Tom. But the big question everybody's been asking tonight is, are you the new gym trainer, or have I just insulted the hell out of you?
Well, I'd like to think that I'm at least 7 or 8 stone lighter, and several hundreds of £1,000s poorer. But no, I think there's one gym trainer. I think that's enough. I said no.
It's actually too many.
I think there's one and one only.
I've only got you for 2 minutes. I just want to ask you a very specific, quick question, just about the rumours doing the rounds about Neil Lennon. So what's your gut feeling, Tom? Is he going to stay or go?
I think he'll stay, to be honest. I mean, I think the speculation is warranted because he's had such a fine season. He's matured hugely as a manager. Domestically, he's done very well. European-wise, I think he's caught the eye of bigger clubs. I suspect that the Evertons and these other clubs, maybe down in England, will think that it's a bit too early for him. They would like to see him again in Europe, but that's to Celtic's benefit, I think. I don't think he's in any great hurry to leave. I think if an offer came, he would probably leave. Or there was a good offer from the Premiership, a good offer. But I think he knows how good he has it at Celtic, and I think he will probably stay. Yeah.
Okay, so you heard it here first, exclusively. Tom English.
You have to remember, my predictions are nearly always wrong.
So he's on his way. Okay, thanks, Tom. We're going to catch you up in the panel just shortly. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, boys.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, 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 tock.
Okay, guys, thank you all for coming to our 7th or 8th question time event, I'm sure, over the years. I'd like to welcome back Chair Chris McLaughlin from BBC, Tom English from Scotland on Sunday, who's been with us before. Welcome back Graham Spears, who's you're kind of a roving guy, freelance,
whoever will take me,
golf, gun for hire, and Alison Robbie from Radio Clyde, who's this first question time, so be gentle. Now we've got a number of questions, so hopefully we'll cover a range of issues this evening. We've got an hour, so lawyers at the ready. Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much. And Ian, it's a question from yourself.
Oh, get it off. And an easy one to start with. Are Celtic fans paranoid?
Those are ladies first.
I'll get my code.
Are Celtic fans paranoid?
No more or no less than fans of other clubs, I would say. I know the historic reputation or the historic allegation made of Celtic fans of paranoia. And if we define paranoia as roughly being illusions or delusions of people having it in for you, then there may have been some truth in that in the past, in the bad old days, when I think Celtic were the subject of prejudice to a degree within society and within football. But today I think that's equalised out. I don't think that's the case. And I would say I don't think Celtic fans are any more or any less paranoid than Rangers fans, or down in England I gather there's these things with Arsenal fans and Man United fans and all this kind of stuff. In fact, I remember being at Old Trafford one night, and I remember a Man United fan next to the press box standing up and shouting at the press. You know, the guy obviously had the perception that most of the press guys in the press box were from London. And he was saying, you guys, write all your stuff about us, having it in for Man United and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, oh well, the same kind of feeling of siege mentality prevails in England as well. So, no more, no less than anyone else.
Tom, surely paranoia must be somewhere in Scottish football. In fact, is it everywhere in Scottish football?
I think it is, actually. I think Celtic, I hate, well, first of all, I hate generalisations. I hate saying, bracketing every Celtic fan as paranoid. I mean, some are not. Some Rangers fans are, some Rangers fans are not. It's why I hate this term, the mainstream media, as if we're all the same. We're not. So I don't like the generalisation, but I would back up what Graham says. I mean, you will find it everywhere, and there will be slights that people will rail against justifiably in all different clubs. It's just the Celtic fans have massive support. To be honest, doing the rounds, I've got the impression from Celtic fans relatively recently that you enjoy being called paranoid. That you actually bask in it to actually take the mickey out of yourselves. And it's to your credit, certainly a lot of Celtic fans I know will make a point and they'll say, that's just me being paranoid. And it's almost a playful thing. But to reiterate what Graham said, I think no more, no less. But I do think you enjoy it.
Alison, I wonder if some of the accusations of paranoia, or even the paranoia itself, has gone away a little bit because of recent success at Celtic and maybe transferred onto those across the city.
That's a possibility. I do agree that elements of every club, you've got some fans who are paranoid and some who aren't, but I think, yes, given what's happened in recent months and over the last year, that maybe over the other side of the city there are more suggestions that we have it in for them a lot more often, although we did get a letter last week from a Celtic fan who didn't put his name on it, and he'd actually sat, must have taken him days, and he'd worked out every decision a referee had made that gone against them, how many hours of football, and so how many hours it took for a decision to go against Celtic, and there was 4 pages of this, and it was leading up to the cup final, and will this happen again, and are we going to lose? So yes, some elements are paranoid and others aren't.
What do you think the media, Graham, in general make of that kind of correspondence, that kind of suggestion of paranoia?
I think we deride it and we get fed up with it. I mean, Tom and Alison, I think will both agree with me that you get every accusation under the sun in the media of being anti this team, anti that team. If you're on Twitter, as we all are, I think all 4 of us are, you have to duck and dive and bob and weave between accusations of being anti-Rangers, anti-Celtic and all the rest of it. I think, in the main, I think the media guys and girls are derisory towards constant flying accusations of having agendas against Rangers or against them, or at least I just let it go with the flow. It just flows past my eyes, down my screen, this slurry of accusations flying past about all my various agendas. I just ignore it, and I think those guys are like,
You kind of got to Tom, haven't you?
You have to, because there's so much of it out there from both sides. It's unending, and I have to say there's a level of genius about some of it. The way some people's minds work to come at things from an angle to try and find an agenda, as in we might be anti-Celtic or anti-Rangers or anti-whoever, and they come up with this incredible theory, and it's actually a level of real cleverness. The way they thought it through, like an Agatha Christie thing. How the hell did the link do all these links? It's remarkable. Some of it is really personal. Some of it is outrageous. Most of it, like Graham, I can let go. Bits of it, I think, really crossed the line. Last 2 or 3 weeks, bits of it crossed the line. And Rangers fans and Celtic fans, I have to say. But you get it from both sides. It's an occupational hazard. I don't have to be on Twitter. I like it. The good outweighs the bad, but certainly you're much easier to find when you're on Twitter. And the crazies, by Christ, they find you.
And we secretly love it. Anyway, Liam Patterson.
Hi guys, thanks for taking the question. In terms of domestic football, how would the panel assess the quality of Celtic's overall performances this season?
Alison?
I remember being at St Johnstone earlier in the season and Celtic got beat, and it was a surprise. As the season went on, when Celtic dropped points or lost games, it wasn't a surprise. There was some magnificent performances domestically and some terrible performances. You could say it was complacency. Was it the Champions League run? Was it tiring them out? But as a professional footballer, you would think you should be able to still put in the performances. But it was. Everyone expected Celtic, before a ball was kicked, that they were going to win the SPL, and that probably, it's only natural the players going to think, oh, this is going to be easy. But I think it raised the competition in the rest of the SPL, but some of the games and some of the performances were poor. But as I say, fantastic at the end of the season, those 2 4-0 wins, then the cup final as well. But then you couple that with the League Cup semi-final against St Mirren.
Tom, they've been kind of difficult to pigeonhole this season, Celtic, haven't they? Been, as Alison says, 1 minute, sublime, next minute.
I think Celtic are significantly better team this year than they were last year. It's just that they haven't consistently shown it. Domestically, they dropped points in 14 matches, which is unlike them, which frankly would not have happened if Rangers were breathing down their necks. It just wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have lost or drawn a lot of those games that they did. I think we've seen the best of Celtic in Europe. That is where I would judge this team. This team played 12 matches in European competition and won 7. They won more matches in Europe this season than they did in the previous 4 seasons combined. But that is the testing ground for this team. The league, the cup, congratulations to them for winning both clearly merited. I think they won the league in third gear. The big test of this team, the improvement in this team was in Europe, and they passed it. And I think it's been a great season for them.
And yet, Graham, quite a few fans voted with their feet and decided not to turn up at Celtic Park. Have you been impressed by them this season?
Yeah, I think Celtic have had a very good season. The title, the Scottish Cup, reaching the last 16 of the Champions League, and a famous win over Barcelona along the way. I would say pretty good going by Neil Lennon and Celtic. Not bad at all. But it's been a strange one domestically. I agree with Tom. They've struggled a bit. I'm convinced Celtic have missed the stimulation of Rangers. I'm absolutely convinced of that, and that probably accounts psychologically or for whatever other reason for the way they've slightly plodded in the league and tripped up sometimes. I've got no doubt Celtic have missed Rangers, and I've been fascinated by this divided reaction among Celtic fans. Some Celtic fans are absolutely insistent they don't miss Rangers at all, and other supporters have said to me, by God we miss Rangers. You love the big rivalry, the big city rivalry, which we see all across Europe, and in this case it's been denied in Glasgow for obvious reasons. So I think it's been a good season. Strangely, I think Neil Lennon needed to do a league and cup double. I mean, I think, the league, just taking the European thing out of it, and Tom's right, the European dimension was very important. But if they had just won the league, 1 out of the 3 domestic prizes, I wouldn't have been so impressed with that. I think they needed a league and cup double, but having got it on top of what they did in Europe, pretty good. I think the problem Celtic have got, and it would apply to Rangers, but it applies to Celtic, is a lot of their main players, and I mean players in a generic term, Neil Lennon or Wanyama or Hooper or any of them, they want to go to England eventually. So how do you, when you've got a good thing going, how do you preserve it? I think that aspect is very difficult.
Suppose it's always been that way to an extent. I wonder if there are any Celtic fans here who still believe, who are still adamant that Celtic did not miss Rangers this year. Anyone?
I think we probably miss them. Personally, I didn't miss them. I don't miss the baggage. I don't enjoy going to Ibrox, but I don't enjoy it because no matter what you say, I think they are 10 times worse than the lowest form when you get to Celtic Park. And I don't miss that.
Did anyone miss the Old Firm games?
I was just going to say that I think maybe there's a case for the players and the team missed the stimulation, the fear factor of losing points. But as a fan, that youth game at Firhill reminded me of all the reasons why it's a terrible fixture.
I'll tell you someone who misses it, Neil Lennon. He misses the Old Firm rivalry, and we can have no doubts about that at all. Neil Lennon's favourite venue in the whole world to go to is Ibrox. and he'll tell you that straight up. Well, actually, in a press conference situation he won't, but over a pint he'll tell you, by God, that is some experience.
It would have been interesting had Celtic not got into the pool stages of the Champions League. Would you have then missed Rangers?
Tom, it's not so much missing Rangers, it's missing a challenge. If that challenge came from an Aberdeen, it's been to game earlier on.
I think I'm being realistic enough to suggest it.
But there's no reason why that can't come again, because during the Ferguson era, Aberdeen managed to win the championship 3 times in 5 years. Dundee United under McLean at the same time. When Celtic and Rangers were relegated to 4th and 5th places in the league.
Do you know what? I respect the fact that that's your opinion, but I don't think that is widely spread. You say we don't miss Rangers. What we miss is the challenge. A lot of Celtic fans have said to me, I'll be up front with you about it, we do miss Rangers.
I'll tell you.
And it's a touchy subject that there's a lot of Celtic fans that don't want to go into that subject.
There is,
don't they? For obvious reasons, don't they?
I mean, my view on the whole Rangers Celtic thing, I don't miss that fixture one little bit. If it doesn't happen again in my lifetime, I wouldn't miss it. Now, maybe that's because, you know, I didn't grow up in it. But I appreciate the spectacle of it on the day, the colour, I appreciate that, the noise, the intensity. The build-up to it I find poisonous. The culture around it I dislike intensely. And I don't miss it at all.
I do think the worst thing that could happen at the moment is for them to draw each other in a cup game. I think it would be worse than an Old Firm game was in the league. And the gulf in class at the moment with the players, I think it would be more poisonous than we've seen maybe in some of them in the past, in the build-up and the aftermath.
But just before we move on, is there something to say, or is there an argument to be made that yes, there's all the poison that comes with it and there's the baggage that comes with it, but you mentioned the spectacle, the intensity of the game itself. Sometimes, is there an argument to say we don't celebrate that enough?
I think it's celebrated morning, noon and night. I think we do nothing but in Scotland but celebrate.
I mean, celebrate the fixture and everything that's right about the fixture.
Oh no, I think we do all that too. I mean, in the build-up to an Old Firm match, you know, we're up every hour God sends previewing the bloody thing, and you can understand because that the market is there for it. I mean, it's just a voracious appetite for this stuff. But we have to remember that Sky desperately want this fixture back on the agenda. They desperately want it, not because of the football. It's because of everything else around it. It's the freak show that they like. The freak show is what they're paying for.
And the sponsor.
It's funny because I just to say I define the Old Firm exactly as you do, Tom, in terms of this ugly monster. I define it in exactly the same way, but my conclusion is different from you. I do miss it.
Yeah.
Because I've been steeped in it since I was 5 years old, and I mean Tom and I and everybody have written about the ugliness of it. You don't miss it one bit. I miss it a hell of a lot.
Let's move on. Angus MacLeod.
Thanks. In the unlikely event of Hooper and others being sold, should Celtic replace any players going with youngsters from the double winning of the 20 team and bank the money rather than splash the cash?
Tom, is that likely or?
I think it's likely that Hooper will go, yeah. And just to go off on a tangent, Wanyama as well, I was down at the Champions League final at the weekend, and in an official programme, I tweeted about this, in the official match day programme, they picked out 6 youngsters aged 20 to 21 from the entire competition, out with the finalists. The top 6 20, 21-year-olds, and Wanyama was one of them. So this guy is, you know, as we know, is a star in the making, and everyone has noticed that. So I could look to Celtic trying to hold on to him. Could they replace him for the under-21s or the under-20s? They could. It'd be madness. I mean, why? You know, I think Neil Lennon is in a position where he can spend what he brings in. So if Hooper and Wanyama bring in 12, 14, whatever it is, he can spend that money. He can't spend any more than that. And I think it's right. I think the financial model in Celtic is absolutely right. It's sensible. But there has to be a level of ambition in there. The level of ambition is to spend what they bring in. Not less, not more. To try and overstretch would be madness. in this climate. I don't think Peter Lawwell is going to do that for a second. But if Wanyama is sold for 6-7 million, that is what they should spend in one or two players like this.
Alison, what's your understanding of how much, I know we've talked today of Neil Lennon being in discussion with Dermot Desmond, what's your understanding of just how much of the money that is raked in from the sale, possible sale of Wanyama, Hooper, Forster, etc., how much of that do you think Lennon will get?
That's a big issue for Neil Lennon, because I don't think he will get that much of it. I think they do want to pocket some of it, but if you're just looking domestically at the SPL and the Cups, he doesn't need to spend a lot of money. He could look at the under-20s, but Neil Lennon wants Champions League success or European success again. He needs to bring players in if he's losing Hooper and Wanyama, but say Hooper goes for 4 or 5 million, Neil Lennon won't get that 4 or 5 million to spend on any player.
I think, to go back to the original question, I think in an ideal world it would be wonderful if Celtic banked the money from a Wanyama and a Hooper and replaced them with the under-20s, some stars from the under-20s. But in the real world, I think there's next to no chance of that happening. I think some of you guys will know this, that the under-20 Celtic team of 3 years ago won the League and Cup double. All of them were binned or haven't made it. One of them, Forrest, has come through. I remember being at a press conference in about 03 or 04 with Martin O'Neill at a time when Celtic had a stellar youth team, including guys like Rocco Quinn, Michael Gardine and some others whose names I can't remember. And O'Neill said casually at that press conference one morning, if in 2 or 3 years' time these guys aren't coming through and playing in our first team, something is far wrong. Well, none of them did. None of them. And I think the blunt reality is you have to be a standout like James Forrest to make it, to get through. It might be wrong, but as Alex McLeish once said, if you want to come into a Rangers or Celtic team, by God, you have to hit the ground running and be up to it. And if you're not, you won't make it. So, in that sense, with the climate around Rangers and Celtic, or let's stick to Celtic, with the climate around Celtic, I think your proposition in an ideal world would be good and laudable, but next to no chance of it working.
It's also commercial reality here. I mean, everyone saw the empty seats at Celtic Park throughout the domestic season. Now, if Gary Hooper comes in and a kid is promoted from the under-20s, that's not going to make any people buy season tickets. They deserve. If Hooper goes out a real star, the fans deserve a decent box office, relatively speaking. Box office replacement.
Angus, do you think that the current situation in the game is now affords Celtic breathing space to try this? Do you think the fans would want that?
I think there's, as we've said, there's limited competition domestically in terms of domestic, the 3 main trophies. So is this now not a time to try and blood the youngsters? If they come in and have one game, as has happened occasionally, and they don't play very well and they're dropped and they don't appear again, is this now a chance to give them a run of 3, 4, 5 games in the team to see if they can actually, whilst they might not hit the ground running, can they develop into better first team players?
I think you're right, and I think there is an opportunity for that in domestically. No question. Neil Lennon doesn't need to play his first choice team every weekend in the SPL. But what they do need, if Wanyama and Hooper go, they need very, very good replacements in terms of trying to get into the Champions League again. You can't put that burden on a 20, 21-year-old.
Alison, do you think that Peter Lawwell will be looking at the situation, and Dermot Desmond looking at the situation again and thinking, yeah, we're going to chase Champions League here again? Or do you think they'll be thinking, do you know what, there was maybe a bit of luck involved in that campaign, we should maybe consolidate, bank some cash and build? What do you think?
I mean, they'll want to bank some cash, but I think given the situation domestically, they want that European run. They want to put Celtic on the world stage again. They want people to be looking at Celtic and going, look at this team in Scotland, they beat Barcelona, they got to the last 16 in the Champions League. I think they accept they need to spend a certain percentage to have that success. It might not be last 16, it might be Europa League drop into after they get to the group stages, but I think they will want to spend some money.
I suppose as well, Graham, there's an argument to say that because of the relative success of the Champions League campaign, Celtic may be a prisoner to their own success this season.
Yeah, of course. Yes, I think I tend to think the last 16 of the Champions League is probably a glass ceiling for Celtic. I don't rule out getting to the last 8, but I think we would all agree that if they got to the last 8, that would be a fairly incredible achievement for a club of Celtic's means compared to the riches in Europe. The only caveat being some clubs do it, and if you look at the last 10 years you would find some clubs penetrating to the last 8. But I think the last 16 in Europe is probably the glass ceiling, and I think it's a fine achievement. In terms of this business about recruiting players, having them, selling them on, bringing in young players, I think the evidence of the last 2 or 3 years says that Celtic have done pretty well, haven't they? They've done pretty well in team building, recruitment. When they got Izagiri, they did a very clever thing at the 2010 or 2010 World Cup. Was it 2012 World Cup? I can't remember what year it was.
2010.
2010, saying let's go to South Africa. Let's look at the players that are there. Let's look at the countries that have a poorer economy, and let's look at their best players. And we will be able to compete for them. This was an idea they came up with at Celtic. Go to the elite in world football, look at the poorer countries, choose their best players, and see if we can get them. And that's how they got a player like Izagiri. I think Celtic have done a lot of clever recruitment, Wanyama being a prime example, where they can buy, have for 3 years, sell on for good profit.
But potentially one of the best bits of recruitment they have done isn't a player at all. It's Jim McGuinness. It'll be fascinating. I'm absolutely fascinated in the next 2 to 3 years to see how many more Celtic youth players turn into top professionals.
This is an Irish bloke, is it?
This is an Irishman, another Irishman who walks on water. Jim McGuinness is a phenomenal operator. He is, one of the most respected coaches in Ireland. He is a big name in Ireland. I know he's very low profile. In Scotland he doesn't do any interviews. This guy is a serious operator, and I'm fascinated to see the work that he does.
He's part-time.
Let's take a quick
3 days a week.
Yeah, we Tom mentioned earlier the commercial reality, and what I found most depressing was the situation with Islam Farouz, who effectively at that age was never going to break into our first team because Chelsea came along with much bigger riches for a kid at that age.
Just before we move on, who here would be disappointed if Neil Lennon didn't spend what he brought in this summer? Very interesting. Jamie Flynn.
That's me. Do you guys think that the stakeholders of the game, and I include the press or the mainstream media in that derogatory phrase,
define the mainstream media.
Do you guys think you have a duty to be more positive about the game in Scotland?
At times, maybe yes. I think too often the game's top down, and it's always looking at the negatives of the game. There's no money, Rangers aren't in the SPL, we need reconstruction, and we do at times have to talk it down to an extent because that's the reality. But if we keep talking it down, I don't see how it's going to get any better, because people looking at Scotland and looking at Scottish football will just listen to it. It's rubbish, there's problem after problem after problem, whereas if we don't talk it up, no one is.
Is that really our job?
Only to a degree. If somebody said to me, if somebody presented me with a list of principles of the duties of the mainstream media, to use the ugly phrase,
the
MSM, I would put telling the truth as a principle, telling what I regarded as the truth, way above the principle of be positive, be rah-rah, talk it up. So I know you're not exactly suggesting that, but I know you're just saying be mindful of the game, and we're all stakeholders, as you say. But I suspect most of us are like this, sitting at this table or on my side of the fence. I'm ill at ease with people saying to me, talk it up, talk it up. I often hear, if you're in a broadcast studio with a manager or a player, there's a tendency among football people to say, you guys need to talk it up more. You're always talking down the game in Scotland. Well, we've not been in a World Cup since France '98. We've had so many abysmal performances here, there and everywhere. I think my job is to tell the truth as I see it, way, way above being positive about the game.
Tom, how often when you sit down to write is the thought of talking up the game? How often does that cross your mind?
It has crossed my mind, actually. It has.
How long?
Many years ago. No, it does, because very occasionally, I will do a stream of columns. I might be doing Rangers columns, and I'm in this cesspit of liquidators and administrators, and I think, Jesus, I didn't get into journalism for this shit. And I think, give me something positive to write about. And I have done that. I think, God, is there not a positive story out there? And you kind of go looking for something positive. Definitely, I've done it. But
and you found it?
I have. Well, to be honest, I'm not playing to the galleries here, but Celtic's European run, I thought was thrilling this year. It isn't, as Graham says, it's not our duty to get out the pom-poms and cheerlead. But what I will say is that there, apart from the possible exception of Italy and France, I cannot think that there's another country in Europe that dedicates as much newspaper print to football as Scotland. It's not all negative. It isn't. The columnists might be negative. There's an awful lot of positive coverage every single day.
You buying that, Jamie?
Personally, I just think that if you don't go to football at the moment, then there's not an awful lot to attract you to football, because clubs are fighting a losing battle everywhere you beat. You know, Scottish football's terrible, the state of the game's terrible, reconstruction, there's no reason worth going. I just think that we're doing ourselves a disservice because we don't really have an alternative. You know, this is it, this is the game.
One of the problems, I've said this on radio a number of times, that Scotland, it needs to reconstruct the league, fine, but whenever they get to that point, after that, they then need to sell the league. And they need someone like a Barry Hearn to come in and say, right, we're going to start revolutionising this bloody thing. We're going to start shaking it up. We're going to make it. I mean, Barry Hearn turned darts into a sexy sport. If you can do that, and do it with the SBA, surely to God. He's now on to what's his new speed? He's going around all these different sports and making them successful. Snooker, obviously, being the classic example in the 80s. We need. In Scottish football, we need a Barry Hearn, we need a visionary to market and sell the game.
Alison, it's surely up to the clubs as well to sell it better, you know, in terms of better access to the media, to try and make more of the characters they have in the game, etc. Do we get enough of that?
Certain clubs, we get enough access. Other clubs, we don't. I mean, I use Celtic as an example. We get our weekly press conferences with Neil Lennon and a player. We don't get to choose what player it is. There are certain players we're not allowed to speak to, and that's a frustration with a lot of clubs. We are restricted, and if we are not given as much access, you want to be positive when you can, but if we're not given the access, then how can we always get the best from a club? And I think that's a big issue, more with the bigger clubs. There are certain clubs that will give us a lot of access and it makes it a lot easier. But if it's a weekly press conference and we're told when we can go and speak to people, it's very difficult at times to get exactly what you want.
Graham, it's a point, isn't it? Because you don't get the chance to find or certainly talk about the character that may be there, because we don't really know. We don't know them. We don't get to see them out with the dressing room or out with the Celtic, the Lennoxtown, media room. You can't get that. So
I think a lot of the press conference situation is very stilted and awkward and stiff, because partly it's probably our fault, the media's fault. Some people in football, some managers and players think we can't be trusted, think that newspapers might put a certain spin on certain stories and certain quotes, and I think there's a certain degree of truth in that. So one thing I've done in my job recently is, because I write, because I'm no longer a beat reporter, I'm not going from press conference to press conference. Some of you guys here have said you don't miss Rangers. Well, I tell you, I don't miss Friday press conferences at Ibrox or Parkhead, because it's the same. After 20 years or after 1 year, you think you've heard it all, the same stock answers. And I don't blame, I used to say to Walter Smith, I don't blame you running out of answers, because I've run out of questions. We ask you the same questions all the time. I think I interviewed David Weir at Rangers probably 17 times, sitting in front of Davy Weir. What new is there to say about it? So I don't miss that. I think, in terms of your Barry Hearn idea, Tom, I think what would really revive the Scottish game and give it a feel-good factor would be our big clubs being successful and doing things again. And that's why I've always said I want Rangers back to the top as quickly as possible. I know that doesn't go down very well with certain fans, but I want our big teams competing again, punching their weight, producing young players, buying good players, and doing very well. That's what I think. Not a Barnum figure coming along, but our teams just being good at football. That's what I want again.
Question?
Yeah, I mean, I think I absolutely understand what you're saying about the need to not overinflate or not tell the truth about Scottish football, but I mean, I would put it to you that what we've seen this year is a bit of a kind of conflation of an argument. We've seen 3 teams, I think, in the past 18 months have severe financial difficulties: Rangers, Dunfermline and Hearts. And this is held up as evidence of the kind of fundamental failure of Scottish football. But what's rarely mentioned is the fact that all 3 of these teams tried to break the bank in order to, create success. So they all spent beyond their means, and they're all suffering for it. So whilst I agree that you shouldn't have to kind of talk up the Scottish game, I think sometimes there's what needs to be done is have the proper conversation about why Scottish football is in difficulty and why these teams are in difficulty.
No, that's right. You're right. I mean, those 3 examples, they're badly run football clubs. That is what they are. They aren't a symbol of anything greater than that. There were three badly run football clubs.
But they're often held up as symbols of
I disagree with that. I disagree with your perception. I don't think people look at Rangers and Hearts and Dunfermline and say, well, this is a body of evidence that says Scottish football is a mess. I think people recognise these clubs self-harmed. Rangers self-harmed. Not the SPL, not the SFA, not the media. Rangers ruined Rangers. The custodians of Rangers ruined Rangers. And Dunfermline with Gavin Masterton and Hearts with Romaroff, I disagree with your central point. I think most people recognise these clubs self-harmed. Their financial model was wrong.
But then we do sometimes, to be fair, I think we do sometimes use those clubs as examples of why Scottish football is,
Well, I think in that case it's flawed. Maybe people agree with you. I think there's a wide recognition among football people that these clubs have only got themselves to blame, and it shouldn't be taken as evidence of a kind of collective malaise in the game at all.
They're badly run clubs, and but I agree with you, we do use them at times to say this is the state of the game. Are more clubs going to go that way, rather than looking at these clubs are well run, they're not going to go that way because they've got money behind them, they haven't overspent. But we do, I suppose, at times look at them and say, well, that's Dunfermline, Hearts, they're following Rangers, who's going to be next?
Is there anyone here that think the mainstream media do a good job, or...?
The thing that is, which is the discussion, it's very interesting. I think, what is mainstream media? I think that one way fans will see the mainstream media are bodies, publications with owners who need to make a profit. So that can lead to bad journalism. I think there's many strands. One strand, I've read lots of broadsheet articles where players swear in them sometimes. Bit of jokey stuff, it passes without incident. If you give a young player an interview, get more access to a tabloid, he swore, it becomes a big sensation. I think tabloids are extremely irresponsible, and what they'll do, the point Graham's making, I think, is that rather than encourage the fans to look at Rangers, Dunfermline and Hearts, they blame Romanoff, Craig White and Gavin Masterton. It's all the cult of personality, which I think obscures what's actually happened. So they obscure the detail and they sensationalise things, and I think broadsheets are great, basically good papers, I think, but I think red talk's causing a lot of damage.
This is, you hit the nail on the head here, my argument about this generalisation of the mainstream media. There is no mainstream media. There is a tabloid, and then there is a broadsheet, with a distinct beats, very, very different beats. And I would have this argument, I've had this argument countless times with football fans, and they'll say, the mainstream media, and I say, what papers do you read? The Sun, the Record. Do you read the Herald? No. Do you read the Scotsman? No. Well, what do you know then about what we write? How can you bracket us in with the tabloids as a mainstream media if you don't read what half of the media is writing about? I think the term does my head in, but I suspect people on Twitter know that it does my head in. That's why they keep reading.
We can talk about this one all night. We're going to move on to Jerry Moore.
Hi. Has the offensive behaviour of football legislation been a success?
or has it been used to harass fans or simply trying to create an atmosphere in a soulless and boring SPL?
Ways to talk up the game there, I know.
Go on, Dave.
Oh, God. The Offensive Behaviour Football Act. I hardly know where to start, let alone finish with this. I think there was a problem with bigoted chanting, offensive chanting in Scottish football, and I thought it had to be addressed. I found it embarrassing when we got into, what they call the noughties, 2000, 2004, 2005. We still had some really offensive chants at football grounds, and I think it had to be addressed. And the reason why I think legislation was needed was because we went years and decades and we couldn't fix it. So if we couldn't behave ourselves, I didn't mind a bit of prohibitive legislation that might rein some people in. I didn't mind that in principle. But I didn't think it would be beyond the ken of the Scottish Parliament to come up with an act that might be workable and enforceable. And it seems to me this one hasn't been. So in fact, I was one of the poor suckers that was called before the Justice Committee to give evidence. And in my rambling way, I made 2 points. One, in principle, I'm for legislation, in principle. But I said I found this act, some of the baggage of this act, a bit odd, because I thought there was stuff already in the statute book that would work. And I found some of this extraneous stuff a bit odd. These were the 2 things I said. They may be contradictory, but that's what I said. So I think the Offensive Behaviour Football Act has been a bit of a botch, and it's ill-defined. It doesn't... I think the way to put it is an act which relies on a subjective judgment, not an objective judgment, but a subjective judgment of what's offensive is doomed to failure. And I thought the Parliament could come up with something a bit better than what they've given.
Tom, there was suggestions that this bill had been, carried through a wave of hysteria. Was that your thinking, or?
Yeah, the so-called shame game. When you look back at it now, it was actually quite tame. It wasn't
ridiculous.
It was a very tame game. There was a schmozzle on the touchline. That was about it. And it was brought in, and there were, politicians did run around with their hair on fire in the immediate aftermath of that. And like Graham, I thought something needed to be done in terms of some of the chanting that was going on in football grounds. This legislation, this act has been deemed to be a failure because there's been a number of cases being brought to court that have been thrown out. There's one very recent in the last few days.
Yeah.
So it has been a failure. It's been seen to be a failure, and it needs to be ditched. And everyone needs to have a mature conversation. I think the conversation at the time was one based on a bit of hysteria, and now would be a very good time to have that conversation because there is distance between Celtic and Rangers. The environment is much calmer now than it was then. I think this would be a very sensible time to get all parties together and say, right, let's redo this bloody thing.
Alison, something that is becoming more and more obvious at football grounds. We cover games at the weekend, and we know that there are protests out with the stadium now, inside the stadium. It's becoming a bit of a problem for the authorities, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the issue you see as well. What is offensive and what isn't? This bill isn't. The legislation's wrong. It's just it's not going to work. And the thing is, we know the march with the Green Brigade that happened and all the trouble around that, which obviously we're not aware of because we don't see as much in the ground. And I get tweets and things after games. Did you hear this chanting? Did you hear this? Did you hear that? And quite often, as you will say as well, we don't hear it. If we've got headphones on, we're listening to a programme. We don't hear it. So it's hard sometimes for us to kind of comment on exactly what's been said, what's been done.
Is anyone here? Sorry, Chris. Is anyone here involved in the Green Brigade? Has an involvement with them?
I was helping set up the display on Friday night before the game Sunday, and I think they don't get enough credit. I'm not a member in, but I'm helped out now and then with certain things, and they don't get the credit for a lot of the things they do. I mean, that was self-funded. The Hibernian display was paid for by William Hillarbleed. From information I know, no one that's pled not guilty has been convicted. It's all been duty solicitors telling wee boys effectively to plead guilty, and that's
The Green Brigade feel let down by Celtic, don't they?
yes, because they've been passing details on to the police, and we were doing the Q&A with Mr. Loyal the last time, and he was moaning about lateral movement and stuff like that. It's like, is he nitpicking with things, and he's worried about health and safety issues.
I think his point at the time was that his name was on the certificate, the safety certificate, and if anything goes wrong, then he's liable for it.
Just a point I'd make about the Green Brigade. I don't understand what their issue is. What exactly is it that they want? Do they want to come into Celtic Park and be allowed to sing songs with the IRA? Because, that is simply not something that I think the vast majority of people coming into the stadium want to hear. And, Peter Lowell at that event said the Green Brigade have been fantastic. They've added colour, they've added a fantastic atmosphere to the stadium. But, there comes with that as well responsibility. And I think, I certainly don't know any Celtic supporters that would feel comfortable going into Celtic Park and hearing those offensive songs being sung. For me, it's just as simple as that.
Is that then the issue with the Green Brigade, that all the good work, as you say, that they do with the displays and everything is quickly forgotten because there's a certain percentage of them doing these songs?
The whole issue of harassment by the police, and I'm sure that there have been cases where perhaps the police have been heavy-handed, but if you're going to go into Celtic Park, you can go and watch the game. There is I think a small section of that grouping that just comes in to sing these songs, and I would say it's a small grouping. I don't think it's a widespread problem in the stadium, but I think Celtic and Peter Lawwell has a responsibility to think about the vast majority of people who are
Tom, just very quickly, because I think we'll need to move on. How, this is maybe going off script a little bit, but how do you think the Green Brigade are viewed by the media?
Well, we don't write about them very often, so in terms of my own opinion of the Green Brigade, I think when they get it right, they're fantastic. When they start singing about the IRA, they lose me completely. I'm sitting there as an Irishman looking across at these guys singing about the IRA, and I'm thinking, what is this? You won't go to any football ground, hurling ground, Gaelic football ground, rugby ground in Ireland and hear anybody singing the songs that these guys sing. You will not hear Ooh Ah Up the Ra, you will not hear Roll of Honour, you will not hear any of these. Anytime I bring some of my friends, Celtic sort me out a few tickets, I bring them and they hear Roll of Honour and they say, what's that? Nobody knows what Roll of Honour. I had to learn about the IRA, Roll of Honour, all these songs. I learned about them when I came to Scotland. I knew nothing of this. Now, I'm from Limerick, I'm not from the north, I'm from Limerick down in the Midwest, but I knew nothing of this culture whatsoever. I had to learn about it when I came to Scotland. And that's shameful, to be honest.
Sean Bradley, sorry, I think we need to move on. Sean, is Sean around?
No, Sean can't make it. Are any of the panel aware of whether there has been any discussions regarding reducing the number of professional clubs in Scotland?
Graham?
Well, it's an ongoing debate. I'm not aware of any imminent plan to reduce professional clubs in Scotland, and I don't lose any sleep over this thing. I mean, I tend not to subscribe to the view that we have too many professional clubs in Scotland, because when we talk about professional clubs, a whole bunch of these clubs are part-time clubs, living hand to mouth. They remind me of churches in Scotland, actually. You know, little churches who take the collection, cover their costs, just get by, just survive. That's what a whole stack of clubs do in the lower divisions in Scotland. I mean, they're termed professional in name only. They're part-time, their players earn 40 quid a week. If they are self-sufficient, if they pay their own way, if they survive, what's the big deal? So I don't get hung up about we've got far too many professional clubs in Scotland, because a large percentage of them are professional only in name, and I don't think they do any harm. In fact, on the contrary, I think Montrose and Forfar and Arbroath and Annan Athletic and these clubs can be quite important to the seedbed of football in Scotland. So I don't bother about that. Alison?
I'm glad you mentioned Forfar there. I mean, I know a lot of maybe fans or chairman of the SPL and things like that think, what is the point of these lower league clubs? What do? They can be feeder clubs. Players go out on loan. I know Forfar, I use the example, take a lot of players from Dundee United. Johnny Russell, for example, played at Forfar because he needed game time, and look at him as a player now. They serve a purpose. But I also think that these lower league clubs need to look at themselves. They need to become community clubs to offer a lot more. Put in the 4G pitches, have different teams, have a ladies team, if there's a ladies team in the area, let them play on the pitch and provide something for the community. But I don't think cutting the number of teams in Scotland is the way forward, because why should some fans lose out?
Tom, we've been hearing for a number of years that so many clubs in the lower leagues are going to go to the wall, you know, that they're heading for oblivion. It's not happened yet.
No, because a lot of these clubs are they watch their face financially. You know, they know what they are, and they keep ticking over. I don't think these clubs are going to go to the wall. I suspect now that there will be a breakaway. I think there will be two, say, professional leagues, if you like. Although I do take Graham's point on that. There will be two professional leagues. What I would like to see is the current third and fourth division. Or second and third division, split into regional leagues, provincial, like say the GAA. Again, I go back to the Gaelic Athletic Association. They have provincial championships, 4 provincial championships. The competition within those provincial championships is fantastic. The winners, the there's playoffs, and then the semi-finals. The top 2 in each provincial championship play off, and then there's an All-Ireland, and it works like a dream. I don't see why you can't have that in Scotland, because I think it's madness for these small clubs. One in the Highlands of Scotland, one travelling down like hundreds of miles to play a game of football. There's going to be 200 people.
Yeah, Graham, sometimes when you're covering this reconstruction, you know, has been on the agenda for some time, but there is sometimes a case of it's the way we've always done it, so we need to do it this way.
Yeah, well, I mean, we I think we've been in convulsions about it, Chris, in Scottish football, and that's a real shame. We've had no clarity, we've had no conviction. I would argue from the leaders, from the media, from this democratic rabble, from the clubs, we can't get any conviction in this, and I think that's been part of the problem. I'm in a small minority. I think 12-12-18 might have worked. I thought the middle 8 sprint might have been good. I think 12-12-18 could have been aspirational. I liked a lot about it, although it's a very unpopular thing to say. Most people panned it, but I think one of the problems we've got is we've had no conviction on this, and the clubs have just been this absolute rabble of opinion. We've not been able to get consensus, and I have to say this, I think the public stances of people like Neil Doncaster and David Longmuir have been mysterious at times, trying to offer a collective opinion on behalf of their clubs. I have found a lot of that pretty mystifying, I must say.
I think time's getting the better of us, so we'll go 2 quick questions. John Murphy, first of all.
Yeah, I realise this is time's against us. What has to happen to allow Celtic, or for that matter any football club, leaving the torture that is Scottish football for a better organised and potentially more lucrative structure? It's a variation on a theme.
Is it torture, Alison?
Torture slightly unfair.
Talk the game up.
Your biggest issue there is you need to convince England, for example, why they should take Celtic. They don't want Celtic, they didn't want Rangers, because they think, what are they going to offer us? What is the benefit to another country to take Celtic? I know there's been talk of, you know, winning the Scandinavian team, things like that. It's convincing them that it's a benefit, because if there's no benefit, then they're not ever going to change their mind. And I know a lot of people say the only way, for example, I spoke to Pierre Van Hooydonk last week, and he said the only way Celtic are going to get bigger and better is to go to England. But at the moment, I don't see that happening anytime soon, for the reason they don't want them.
It's a very old chestnut, Graham, isn't it? I mean, are we ever going to see it?
I used to wonder if I'd see it in my working lifetime. I think two things need to happen to answer the question. TV money, a TV executive has to be so influential, so awash with money that talks, that counts. That's the first thing. And that could happen in the current narrative we have. I mean, it may be that in 20 years' time TV is not the powerful force it is, but in the here and now, TV is very powerful. That's the first thing that would have to happen. And the second thing that would have to happen simultaneously, and this is beginning to happen, is a change of mindset at UEFA in terms of merged leagues. The Czechs and the Slovakians are about to merge, I think. The Scandinavian countries have been looking at it. We have this odd sovereign thing in Britain where we're under one government and we're 4 countries. It's not inconceivable that if the Czech League and the Slovakian League merged and works, that UEFA would say, well, okay, we will allow this to happen. We will look at this elsewhere. So the body politic is beginning to change. So 2 things. Powerful, influential TV executive makes it happen, and UEFA continue to go down this road, which they're stepping onto now, of merged leagues, and it might happen.
Is there a new appetite at UEFA, Tom?
I think there's a softening of the opposition for cross-border competitions for nations that have a mutual benefit, that they have common ground. That does not apply to Scotland and England. As we know from our very good friend Charles Green, when he came out and said that Man United wanted Rangers and Celtic, about 3 seconds later, Man United issued a statement saying, "This is utter nonsense, don't believe a word of it." Richard Scudamore, the chief executive of the FA, is on record as saying that it will never happen. In fact, his quote was, "No means never." Now, he won't be around forever, but there's absolutely no appetite whatsoever. I know at various times a manager, an Arsene Wenger or whoever, might say, "Oh, it would be nice to have Celtic and Rangers in a league." It means nothing.
John.
Arsene Wenger, Alex Ferguson, any of these, it means nothing. These decisions are made above their heads.
What do you think?
Yeah, well, just to be brief about it, I watched Watford and Crystal Palace playing for 127 million yesterday. You think, well, 100 times out of 100, we would probably take them, and where is the fairness in European law in terms of where you can ply your trade?
Part of the problem in that is that we're actually sitting up here watching them. Therefore, Sky, we're paying our money for Sky, and Sky continue to pump it into English football and not into Scottish football. I think proportionately we've got over 10% of the UK subscriptions to Sky Sports come from Scottish punters, yet you give them 3 billion quid and they give us 20 million quid. It just doesn't stack up somewhere along the lines. Things have got to change.
Let's end on a cracker. Very quickly, Vincent Mooney.
Graham kind of touched on it, but it was just around Scottish football's governing bodies. Do you think they're fit for purpose?
I think we've. I'm wary of lining up Stuart Regan and Neil Doncaster and David Longmuir against a wall and shooting them for incompetence, because I think there's been a firestorm in the last 12 months, 18 months that Red Adair couldn't have coped with and put out.
Or Fred Astaire.
Fred Adair. I think there's been a firestorm that couldn't be contained, and it consumed all of us, not just the leaders, guys. We were all wrong-footed by it. We didn't know where to go with it. My goodness, in the drama around Rangers just now, the central characters still don't know where it's going to go, where they're going to end up, if some of them are going to end up in the clink. So our leaders have not shone at all, but I'm wary of kind of knee-jerk condemnation, I think.
Right, Alison.
I think
Who's up against the wall for you?
I think the problem is Scotland's too small to have 3 governing bodies and 3 different people in charge, and if the 3 of them can't agree, what chance has Scottish football got? The 3 of them are there and they're not always all singing from the same hymn sheet, and that's where the problem lies. Because different people agree with, somebody will agree with Stuart Regan, somebody will agree with Neil Doncaster, somebody will agree with David Longmuir, and that's the problem. Then all of a sudden we think, or some folk think, they're not fit for purpose. There's too many of them, there's too many chiefs.
Tom, Graham's right, isn't it? We've been chasing their tails the past year.
Absolutely, they've had a tough job. If you look at it, Neil Doncaster, who takes an awful lot of criticism, and you might say rightly, Neil Doncaster has no power.
Yeah.
If he makes a cup of tea at Hamlin, he has to get the permission of the SPL clubs. That is a fact. That is a fact. He is completely controlled by the clubs. So I do kind of feel some sympathy when he gets absolute dog's abuse for being incompetent. All he's doing is the club's bidding. That is what he's doing. Stuart Regan, I would ask one question. This is what determines my opinion of Stuart Regan. Is he honest? And I think he is honest. Has he made mistakes? Yes, he has. But I think he's honest. I think he's trying to do the right thing. It's sometimes absolutely impossible in this football climate to be seen to be doing the right thing by all people. But I think he's honest, and I genuinely think he's trying to do the right thing.
I'm guessing you might have a different opinion, Vincent.
Well, I'm just wondering who Campbell Ogilvy's got compromising pictures of, because I think the feeling just around him is that he seems to be Teflon, and I'm wondering why there's no more questions being asked about him.
I thought Campbell Ogilvy, I know this is a very sensitive area, especially I find with Celtic fans actually, who have real objection to Campbell Ogilvy swanning around in his presidential role. I have to say that in the dealings I've had with Campbell Ogilvy and in the public press conference arena, I think he's been quite open actually. He said, I should have asked more questions. You know, when he was at Rangers, one problem with this whole saga is, at Rangers it was an autocracy. Sir David Murray. And Campbell Ogilvy and a lot of the directors at Rangers had next to no power. In fact, one of the Rangers directors was quoted recently as saying, throughout all the EBT years at Ibrox, in the boardroom, they mentioned it once briefly in one club board meeting. EBTs were never discussed because at Murray Towers he said, this is what we're doing, you guys shut up, and Daddy, everything's okay with me.
Would he have survived if he was a politician?
I don't know. He seems to me to
have... As a politician, he would have, yeah. He always survived.
I mean, Chris, what power does Campbell Ogilvy have?
You could argue on Ogilvy, and I've sat across the table from him as well, you could argue, and I'm sure plenty of people would argue, that yes, David Murray didn't tell him what was going on, but that ignorance is no defence. And that is something that he could be done on, but hasn't been. I think, again, I'll go back to Stuart, do I think Campbell Ogilvy is crooked? Absolutely not. I think he's absolutely straight, but I think he was incredibly naive. And maybe that should have been enough for him to stand down.Maybe. But
I think also we're duty bound to point out just now that the EBTs thing is very, very complicated, but as the law currently has judged, Campbell Ogilvy's EBT was correct. Not wrong, was right. I think it was morally very dodgy, and I don't believe for a minute that EBTs were created to be a vehicle for blatant tax avoidance. I don't think that's what EBTs were meant to be about. In fact, the government agrees with me because they stopped it, and Rangers had to send out all these letters to all these players saying we need to stop this because it's no longer working for us. But we're duty bound to point out that the law of the land at the moment has said it was legal.
Anyone else? Thoughts?
I think Neil Doncaster, he doesn't need to do himself many favours because I've heard both of you guys on the radio trying to get answers out of him, and I think sometimes he tries to politic too much rather than just come out and say what he would see maybe said.
He will say that himself, but he will also say that if he says a word out of place, he's got 12 clubs listening to him, and if he says something that one of those 12 clubs don't like, there's trouble. So he has to play the political game purely for the benefit of his 12-member clubs.
I think time has got all of us. I
think so. Yeah. Okay, folks. Can I say thanks to Tom, to Graham, to Chris, and to Alison for another fantastic night? You've given see at the end, Vincent's been roving with his iPad for Tic Talk radio on Hail Hail Media, the podcast. So that would be beamed out worldwide.
Acronyms Shamrock.
Yes. Acronyms Shamrock, Celtic Supporters Club, and we thank them as well for coming along tonight. It's been great. But again, thank you very much, guys. Really enjoyed that, and I love to talk to you. Thank you.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, 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 tock.
Okay, well there you have it. That was, I think that's maybe our third or fourth audience Q&A session with the Civil Service Celtic Supporters Club. So, just a wee round up with Kevin. Kevin, how did you think that went? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, well, it's the first one I've been here, and it's I felt myself wanting to dive in on at least a dozen occasions.
Well, you were very tempered.
But it was, I don't know if it was well after me sitting in the front row. I don't know if I'd have been restrained. Because obviously you're limited with time and there's questions there that need to be asked, etc. A wee bit disappointed that some of the around offensive behaviour, for example, wanted to come in back in and that, because that's not about the Green Brigade. That's about.
I felt like it planned a wee bit.
It's about all the Celtic fan groups. And actually, if it does anything, it shows me that we think that it's broadly known what the Green Brigade's specific grievances are, and then you've got a group of supporters here and they kind of question it back to them, what's their grievances, and nobody was able to pipe up or able to say it. And I find that quite interesting in itself, that it's not necessarily broadly known. So I felt myself wanting to come in there, and I just couldn't. Chris McLaughlin moved on. I think he's seen the rage in my eyes and decided to call it a day there. But
it did show that there's certainly no a lot of understanding within the media, or for the guys and girls that were certainly here, but even amongst Celtic fans.
Yeah, so that's what I was meaning. That was what I was meaning. When the question went out to the fans that were sitting here, it was like, what's the Green Brigade? And what I wanted to drop back to was the offensive behaviour at football bill, and the question that was actually asked, it was about the bill, wasn't it about the Green Brigade? And that bill's not just about the Green Brigade.
Yeah.
The Celtic Supporters Association have come out, Fans Against Criminalisation as an umbrella organisation. The Celtic covers the Celtic Trust, the Green Brigade, CSA, Irish Federation. So I wanted to make that point, because it was unfairly then. Obviously, Ian spoke and expressed his opinion on it, and I was keen to come in and
counter that.
Well, just give the perspective of, we know it's not, because I'm not in the Green Brigade, but I went to the FAC rally because I stand behind. I don't agree with people being videoed at going to football matches. I've been to away matches myself and happened to be in the vicinity of the stadium at Kilmarnock in particular, where the Green Brigade were behind us, and we get videoed. Me and my 12-year-old son get videoed the full game. That's just not acceptable to me.
Yeah, so I agree. Just around the kind of panellists, we'll go through them one by one. What did you think of the panellists? Tom English?
To be honest, I've not getting a great problem with Tom. I kind of, whenever I listen to kind of any of the radio stations, it always tends to be Radio Scotland. And there are times when I listen to Radio Scotland and I get deeply frustrated over the people who are inputting into it. So you've got kind of Craig Patterson, Billy EBT Dodds. It just seems a who's who of ex-radio players. But I can listen to Tom and I'll agree with some points and I'll disagree with other points, but I think by and large he's quite fair. So I don't know, yourself, what do you feel?
That's the second time we've had him on. I've heard him on a panel, and we've interviewed him before for Tic Talk. And I guess quite a lot of the time your public perception changes when you come face to face with people, and by inference they become a bit more human.
Personable.
I find Tom okay. I quite like I respect his opinions. I don't agree with everything he says, but I respect his opinions.
But that's like anything, because when we sit around and have our Tic Talk, we don't we can argue and don't necessarily agree.
That's true. Similarly, I think Graham Spears, I've come across Graham quite a few times, and again, obviously don't agree with everything he says, but I do find Graham quite personable as well, and I find him I think because he is an intelligent guy and quite articulate, I find him quite interesting, so I quite like listening to Graham.
I do too, but just going back to Tom English as well, I think coming as from out with these shores. It was quite interesting to hear his comments on the Glasgow Derby, and if it never happens again, it's something that he would be absolutely comfortable with. And I kind of share
agree with him.
that opinion, and that's why I made the point. It's not Rangers that we need. It's teams to come up to the mark and start producing a challenge, and that doesn't need to be Rangers for me. And I found that quite interesting. I also enjoyed his mainstream media, because we do that. We pride ourselves in being Internet Bampots, and we pride ourselves in planning the mainstream media. But I do believe, and another point I wanted to come back in when they were talking about the media conferences, it's hardly any reason they don't put players up for media conferences. I don't want to see things in the back page, and I don't buy the red tops as we've already spoken about. I don't want to see one line taken from a half-hour press conference and for that to be blown up out of all proportion, and that's what happens, and that's why Celtic put them on Celtic TV now.
That's why they're protective of them.
And I agree that there is a difference on some occasions between the red tops, and I would say that is the absolute MSM. But there is also, even within the broadsheets, still a degree of distrust. And I've got that. I don't buy papers, and I wanted to kind of ask them. Graham Spears spoke about, come back to Graham, the guiding principle of truth being the number one when he was talking about talking up Scottish football. It'd be nice to understand how many he believes of his media counterparts across the whole of Scottish media have actually shared that same guiding principle. Because I would say, from what I hear, that there's not as many as he might believe, or
I could accept, I could accept that Graham Spears tells the truth. I could also suggest that he might be wrong. He's just wrong, but I don't question whether he's been truthful as he knows it, if you want to put it like that.
But you look at someone like Jabba, and his conversation
Django, the same.
For years, not just in the last year, but for your Bill Leckie. I mean, guys like that have got no credibility within the Celtic support. Whereas I think Tom, and you're right, if they've got an opinion, and it might be a strongly held opinion, and I might have an equally opposite strongly held opinion, but I still kind of respect them more than all these other people that kind of under that MSM banner. So, and you can tell. I think you can tell by the fairness that Tom English feels that there are people within the MSN banner that don't have the same guiding principles that he obviously feels he has. But the fact he says it gets on my tits.
Well, I mean, he objects strongly that he's even labelled with
exactly
similar to him, and I can understand that, because they do a completely different job. And finally, Alison Robbie, it's the first I've really spoke to Alison. Now that I've spoke to her, I can recognise her voice, if you like. I don't know her particularly well, but she spoke well in the pre-interview that we did, and actually she spoke well on the panel as well. So actually, I was quite impressed with her.
I think probably where she was sitting, had she been sitting just even the layout, where you had, I'll explain it for the listeners, we had with Tom English, and then next along we had Graham Spears, and then Chris, and then she was at the end. If she'd maybe been sitting between Tom English, and I just felt that it was kind of, everything was directed at they two, and Chris would come to her, and didn't hear as much from her, I think, as we did the other two. And she's obviously fairly, probably the most inexperienced of the three people.
They spoke well, actually. I think spoke very well in a kind of 1-to-1 that'll be at the beginning of the podcast. So I was quite impressed. So all in all, you're quite happy, you enjoyed it, you would come along again?
I would need to have more latitude to be questioning of them, and not in a nasty or rude way. It's just I did feel frustrated a number of times, and the other question is, I mean, Campbell heavily, inverted commas, heavily conflicted Ogilvy, how they can't see. I mean, to be honest, the question they were talking about, the question he asked about when the EBTs and not asking the question, and the one question that he asked consistently on every player who signed for Rangers until Maurice Johnston broke the mould to an extent was, what school did you go to? And that is enough for me to say he's an absolute dinosaur, and all the rest of the stuff that goes on top of that just makes it even more unpalatable that he's a figurehead of Scottish football, because you've got the two league bodies and then you've got the governing body, and he sits at the top of the governing body. He's the man that sacks Stuart Regan or appoints Stuart
But
Regan.
at the very least, during that time in the last season, he should have at the very least been on gardening leave. Do you know and that?
Yeah, no transparency.
Yeah.
So Stuart Regan was asked about his heavily conflicted position, and he effectively says, I've spoken to him, and he said he didn't do it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, is that enough?
That's
Yeah,
good enough.
do you know what I mean?
Well, when it's your boss, it probably is.
That's true. So things like that, and it'd be nice to be able to explore more of that with them in a more combative exchange, rather than the only criticism I would say is that it's quite what's the word?
Well, I think you have to be. It is a bit more reserved because of the format of it, and obviously Ian has got good contacts there. But Ian encouraged us. You know, he says don't hold back from that point of view, but it's just your opportunity. I think now that we've made contact with a couple of them, that maybe next time we'll maybe exploit a bit more the one-to-one. You know, because I was kind of conscious that actually when you got them engaged, they could have, you know, particularly Alison. Alison was very open and honest, and it was really good.
I'll be honest, I think if you did have a more combative exchange with them, they'd be happy to engage, because one of the guys, Graham said, and they said, I fundamentally disagree with your point, and there was that degree of kind of, right, okay, that's fine, I've made my point, and there was the good. I enjoy that much more, rather than being a bit of a sterile, okay, we'll ask a question, well, I get your answer, right, we'll move on. It's much better to be able to have some two-way dialogue, and
we would like it to be a one-to-one or a two-to-one, obviously.
Well, you know, people don't want to listen to sterile question answers. They want, if they say something which somebody doesn't agree with, they might be able to at least challenge. That's what journalism should be about. That's what they guys should be doing. And there's our criticism, easy for me to say, of the mainstream media, that they just take what they're fed and they just write it down and they don't challenge it. So it would have been nice to have been the ability to challenge a couple of the things, but I realised that I didn't want to frustrate.
You were very well behaved on your first outing.
It's a pleasant change.
So just to finish off, I'd just obviously like to again to extend our thanks to Ian Monk from the Scottish Civil Service Celtic Supporters Club, and we hope to be along to one of your events again in the near future. So I hope you enjoyed that, and a hail to everybody.
Hail.
The thing I want to see the most is the Glasgow Celtic score. I've been to Munich, been to Paris and Berlin. I watched injustice fall upon you in Turin, and I've shared the pain and glory with the friends that I have made as I dance from place to place in green and white on a worldwide tin parade.